Do you want to learn more on how to put money to work in regenerative food and agriculture? Follow our video course via investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/course or in the links below. Now, on to the podcast. Welcome to another episode of Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Investing as if the planet mattered. A podcast show where I talk to the pioneers in the regenerative food and agriculture space to learn more on how to put our money to work to regenerate soil, people, local communities and ecosystems while making an appropriate and fair return. Why my focus on soil and regeneration? Because so many of the pressing issues we face today have their roots in how we treat our land, grow our food and what we eat. And it's time that we as investors, big and small, and consumers start paying much more attention to the dirt/soil underneath our feet. Before we get started, I've been recording these interviews next to my day job, and I will definitely continue to do so and release about an episode a month. But at the same time, I would love to take this further, share more interviews. There are many more stories to share on investing in regenerative food and agriculture. More depth, improve the quality, maybe even doing some video series. So I started a Patreon community, which makes it easy to support creators like myself. If these podcasts have been of value to you, and if you have the means, I invite you to support me and make this happen. For more information, please find the link to my Patreon account in the description below. And now, without further ado, the interview. Enjoy! I interviewed Mike Korchinsky of WildlifeWorks a couple of months ago, and we had a long discussion on regenerative agriculture and how to work with indigenous groups and communities in Congo and Kenya. But only the last 15 minutes we got into the role of impact investing in regenerative agriculture. And I feel like that part in itself as a standalone podcast has a lot of value and interesting insights. So that's why I wanted to share it with you, not only as part of the full interview, which I will link below, but also as a standalone podcast of about 17 minutes. Enjoy. And what do you see as the most important barriers to scale up these small pilots or small examples of what's actually possible? What is needed to scale up those to actually reach the impact we all need?
Let me look at the clock here, just to say. I'm to see how much time. I think one of my pet peeves is having come from the business community and having worked to try and find an economic solution for our work as well as for wildlife and forests around the world for 20 years. I've seen lots of ideas come and go and fads and things. And one of the things that drives me nuts is the direction that the impact investment community has taken. It's understandable. These are investors, and so for the most part, you don't start an impact investment community with activists, because they don't have any money to invest. You start an impact investment community with investors, and so yes, of course, those are investors that have a desire to be part of the solution. So they're nice investors, but they're investors, and those investors have choices in how they invest their money, and they want to make sure that their own fortune is sustainable so they can continue to invest. So they that's their first priority, and maybe rightly so. Otherwise, their role as an investor will diminish over time and disappear. So they want so the impact investment community, the activists and I don't know who else, the creative folks that wanted to divert investments away from unsustainable investments towards impact investments, have created a story line which is, in my opinion, potentially very threatening to the success in the future. That story is that, impact investments can have all the returns of a traditional financial investment, plus these other bottom lines, plus social benefits and biodiversity benefits. So look, you don't have to give up anything economically, and you get the benefit of doing something great for the planet. Who would not put their money into that? And so that's been the story in many conferences all over the world for many years now. And so those well-intentioned investors have all said, oh, yeah, absolutely. Who would not do that? Let's put our money there. And so they all put vast amounts of money, really, into this impact investing field in fund after fund after fund. And then and then the fund managers go out in the world looking for these deals that have the exact same return as they would get in a traditional investment, and social benefit and biodiversity benefit, and they can't find them. And so because it actually costs more money to do business in weird places where you're trying to provide economic solutions for small villages in rural communities a long way from a market. And so these things cost more money and have a much higher risk profile, and therefore they will need for an investor to be able to demonstrate a higher return for the investor to be interested, or the investor has to be willing to offset their financial return with the social and biodiversity return. So, and to this point, the story that's being sold to them is that they don't have to make that compromise. And that's damaging because it means the money's not really flowing into true impact investments. It means that eventually, because they were sold on the idea and they made the decision to move money based on the idea that they would get a similar return, in the end, the fund managers compromise, in our opinion, on the impact. They compromise always on the social and biodiversity benefit. And maybe not horribly. I'm sure these are all great funds doing good work, but they're not doing aggressive work to solve the problems that can't be solved without massive investment. So my concern is really that problem won't be solved until we stop telling that lie to the investment community and say, look, if you have the capacity, then you have to carve off some portion of your investment portfolio and assign it to a high risk activity that could generate a return for you that is comparable, maybe not equal to, and it could in some cases generate a higher return. But that should not be why you're doing it. Why you're doing it is to put a portion of your economic wealth to work to solve very hard problems that need your money, and that will generate enormous social and biodiversity benefits well beyond what any impact fund is currently delivering. And that may be able to return a financial investment if they work. But many of them have not proven that they can work at scale, and therefore you're going to be taking a high risk. Until we start telling that story, I think we're not going to make as much progress as we need to as quickly as possible in solving some of these larger problems and scaling them up. And that concerns me. I think that we as a society need to find a better way to define triple bottom line. We need to define it not as triple return for the investor, which right now when people look at triple bottom line, they think, well, I get the same financial bottom line and then I get a social bottom line and a biodiversity bottom line. Who would not make that investment? But that's a fiction. And we need to start the conversation over with how do you value the social and biodiversity benefits in society, possibly even financially? How do you value them so that an investment that generates tremendous social and biodiversity or biodiversity benefit is more highly prized than an investment that generates high financial return? Until we figure that one out, I suspect that progress will be too slow in general, and the lives of people like me will remain to be a significant challenge. Yeah, so that's the big challenge I see on the horizon, is how do we rethink the notion of value? I mean, money and financial value is an entirely fictitious creation of our societies to allow us to function. We need a new fictitious creation in some respects that values in real terms social benefit and biodiversity benefit, so that it's not a compromise. It's more valuable to us as a society right now. We need to acknowledge that, and somehow, but also within the realities that people have to buy food to eat and pay for school fees and drive themselves around and all these other things. So that's the challenge, I think, is how do we create real value in social and biodiversity impact that is recognized in real terms, that allows investors to make investment decisions purely on those benefits rather than secondarily on those benefits.
I think you touch on an extremely interesting point. We've sold a lot of these funds and a lot of these impact investments as it is something easy, as you can just do your normal investments, you put another set of glasses on and you'll be fine. And I think another underlying illusion is it's easy in general to make money with money. It's easy to make investments. And if you're if you're just making investment, you probably will make what X return because somebody in Instagram made so much money. And the truth is, it's not easy to grow money, and it's not easy in general. It's not easy in the impact space, and it's not easy in the normal economy or in the economy to make more money with money. I mean, we only hear the success stories, but the truth is most people in Silicon Valley are losing money, and we only hear the few that are doing it well, and that fuels our mind like, oh, I could also do that, which is probably not true. And if you then look at the impact investing space and you want to also make a 10x return, it's going to be very tricky because you are, like you said, dealing with agriculture, you're dealing with people far away from any road. And of course, there are real costs. It's the real economy in the real world. So you're happy if you get a return and if that is compensating for inflation and some of the risk. And I think it's the illusion of easy returns in all of society is something we should also really battle, because it makes any discussion really difficult, because everybody would say, yeah, but I could get 20% there. But if you really look over long stretches of time, I mean, these returns aren't there anyway. But it's in people's mind that it's easy money somewhere else. So why would they invest in this case in Congo?
Right. Yes. Exactly. I mean, and there are very easy ways to examine your premise, because if you look at the performance of all the fund managers and all the high net worth individual asset managers of the world, what are they telling their clients they can receive, as a long-term return on their investment? It's not 30%, So, and these are people whose entire lives have been around how to make money for their clients and scouring the world for a portfolio of investments to give them the best financial return, and they're not generating crazy returns there. So you look at those averages and the performance of money managers around the world, and you can get a pretty good idea of how difficult it is to actually make money with money. Because they have unlimited amounts of money and unlimited access to brains and thought leadership on how to turn that money into more money, and it is still tough.
And still they can't get it done, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, a story I was told by somebody in Kenya. Our core project is in Kenya. We've been there many years. In Nairobi, which is a very nice African city. It's very, very developed and has lots of creature comforts for expatriates. And is a very short distance to elephants, so lots of people like being in Nairobi. So there are something like 89 impact funds in looking for venture deals in Nairobi, and I'm friends with some of the people involved in some of the funds, and one of them told me that over the past 3 years, between all 89 of them, they'd done 2 deals. So you can imagine how much money is just sitting there, looking for this.
It's a management fee, yeah.
Yes, just earning management fees for all these fund managers while they look for the Holy Grail, while they scour the landscape for this
Uber of Nairobi, yeah.
Mythical beast, exactly, the Uber of Nairobi. That's exactly what they're looking for. They're looking for the Uber of Nairobi, or they're looking for the Archer Daniels Midland of Nairobi, how to make an agricultural giant, a sustainable agricultural giant that will generate returns in the billions for their high net worth investors. So, yeah, so that's there's work to be done there. I think that money it could be doing far more good if the storyline had been different. If the I don't dispute that today, in today's world, financial investors need the promise of a return. I'm not a promise of a financial return for their financial investment. But I think that their expectations need to be reset in terms of what is possible, and we need to find a way to reward them for the social and biodiversity benefit in real terms, on top of the financial reward, if we really want to see success in that sector.
Thank you for the last point. I think it's a great point to end this interview, but to finalize it with one more question. What should smart impact investors look for, after all we heard now, to become active in this space? What would you advise them?
I would advise them to focus on the impact that they want to have. There's no point in being in an impact investment fund if the fund isn't having the impact. I mean, there is a point. Maybe it makes for great cocktail party conversation. But most of it, in my opinion, and from the ones I've met, most of these impact investors, when you get to the source of the money, they truly want to have an impact in some aspect of life that they have a passion for. And so my advice to them is don't lose sight of the passion you have for the impact you desire, and make that requirement the highest order requirement for some segment of your portfolio, and don't let the fund manager come back to you and say, well, I wasn't able to find anything, because what he's essentially saying is, I'm worried about my own job if I can't deliver a financial return to you that is competitive because of what I told you when I established the fund, and I couldn't find anything that creates a competitive return and addresses your passion. That's essentially the long version of what they're telling you. So it's incumbent on the impact investor to say, all right, try again. Don't worry, here's a 5-year contract to go find me these deals, regardless of the financial return. Yes, we can have a financial return target, but I really want to see my money make an impact on this issue. So go find me deals that address this issue regardless of the financial return, and then we'll have a conversation about whether or not I'm willing to accept the return, risk, etc. profile of those deals. But really focus on the impact. Don't think just because you're investing in an education fund that you're going to have high impact on education, because if you've made the principal criteria the financial return, the fund manager will find a creative way to call it education and make the return in order to keep their jobs. So I think a lot of the onus has to be, which is, again, not opposite of what the original intent. These investors wanted to have the impact. The problem is they also wanted to get rid of the problem of finding the deals, and that's where the dilemma occurs. They wanted to hand off the challenge of finding those opportunities to have that impact, and in doing so, they're now employing somebody to do it for them, and that person has a whole different risk profile than the original investor. And therein lies the dilemma: is how do you transfer that risk profile that the original investor has through the funds, and in many cases through multiple layers of funds, because the money is so big these days in impact that there's a global education fund that invests in continental education funds, that invest in national education funds, that invest in girls' education funds, that finally invest in a school. And so how do you transfer the economic or the risk profile of the original investor and the desire for impact first through all those layers of professional management to make sure that the actual investments meet the original impact desire? That's a real challenge, and I don't know the answer, but I do know that the impact investors themselves cannot delegate that responsibility. They need to focus on that issue if they want to see that problem solved.
Thank you so much, Mike, for this interview. I'm sure we'll be checking in the next months and years to see on the progress, and we'll hopefully have more of these conversations. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks very much, Ken.
You just listened to the last part of the interview with Mike Korchinsky, the CEO of WildlifeWorks, where we discussed the role of impact investing in regenerative agriculture. Please come back soon for more of these interviews. If you found the Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast valuable, there are a few simple ways you can use to support it. Number 1, rate and review the podcast on your podcast app. That's the best way for other listeners to find the podcast, and it only takes a few seconds. Number 2, share this podcast on social media or email it to your friends and colleagues. Number 3, if this podcast has been of value to you, and if you have the means, please join my Patreon community to help grow this platform and allow me to take it further. You can find all the details on patreon.com/regenerative agriculture or in the description below. Thank you so much, and see you at the next podcast. Dear friends of the podcast, I'm super excited to share with you the online video course Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food. How to put money to work in regenerating soils at scale and growing a lot of tasty food while doing it. Why are we doing this course? After 100 interviews and more than 100 hours of audio asking the question how to put money to work in regenerating soils, and have been following the space since 2011 and recording these podcasts since 2016, we thought it was time to share our lessons learned. What have we seen in the space over the last years? How have we built our decision-making framework? What to focus on with the podcast? How have we picked interviewees? What questions should you ask? What is happening in the space? What should you read? What should you listen? What should you watch? How to approach this space. For whom is this course? You, the soil builders and investors in this space. The soil builders, people working in this space, entrepreneurial farmers, fund managers, vehicle builders, crowd investing, platform builders, agtech companies, farm-to-gut food companies, permaculture, keyline designers, holistic management consultants, etc., etc. People that are building soil at scale. And the investors who are putting their own money to work through their family office or as private individuals, or people who are putting other people's money to work through foundations, institutional capital, banks, insurance companies, etc. Is this course free? No. This is pay what you think it's worth. Meaning, I have no way of knowing what this course will be worth to you. And I'm very aware that among the listeners of this podcast, we have people with very different means. So I'm inviting you, if this course is creating value to you, and if you have the means, to consider paying what you think it's worth. Thank you. So what is this course? It's currently a series of 17 videos, mostly ranging from 10 to 15 minutes, plus PDF slides, so you don't have to ride along. We're gonna look into why invest in regenerative agriculture and why extractive agriculture is so risky, how to invest, what kind of frameworks you could and I think should build, what to invest in, what kind of co-investors you could find, or what kind of investors you could find if you're a soil builder. Every lesson will have a digging deeper part where I will share what kind of reports, what kind of interviews, what kind of videos you can look into if you want to dig deeper. We're going to look at nutrient density, landscape design, and a lot more. So what is it not? It's not a list of investable deals. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist in this world. We're really at the beginning of the regenerative agriculture and food revolution. It's also not investment advice. Before making any investment, please find professional investment advice. So get ready, get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or whatever you're drinking. Click on the link below, sign up, and I'm really looking forward to your feedback.